And welcome back to the Clear Jets podcast for us, Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Apologies for the voice. Michael and I were both at last night's game, and Michael, great Jets win, last-second punt return, 1-0 in the division and 1-0 in the season. So great start to the year. I don't know. How do you feel about things?
I'm feeling really good. I mean, obviously there's a lot of hype going into this game, and you and I were both there, and you could tell by our voices. We were screaming our heads off the whole time. The crowd was into it. It was everything I ever dreamed of from a MetLife crowd. I mean, it was packed. The energy was crazy, and they delivered. I mean, a comeback win at home in overtime over the Bills. I mean, it hardly gets any better than that. And there were so many positives to take away. I mean, from obviously Gibson's punt return being the highlight, but I thought Jeremy Ruckert's blocking was really good. I thought AVT was really good in this game. So, I mean,
How about that Garrett Wilson catch?
I mean, we were in the opposite end zone, so I didn't have the greatest view of it, but I recognized right away that he caught it on the ground, and it was stunning. But then we saw the replay, and I really was able to appreciate, like, wow, that was crazy. So,
all right.
I mean,
we should probably.
It's hard to start off a season much better than this. So, I mean, we talked about the tough schedule going into the bye week, and this was maybe the toughest game among those first six. I mean, Kansas City's in that discussion, depending on if Kelsey's available. But to win this game gives you that confidence that you could take any of those.
And I think we have to talk about the biggest story, Breece Hall's return. I mean, 10 carries. Right. Had him on a limited snap count, but he looked like the Breece Hall of old.
Yeah, for sure. And on the one long run, it did seem like he ran out of gas a little bit at the end. But to be expected. He's still on that pitch count. I think he'll be able to finish those off a little bit better, as he gets more reps under his belt. But still, I think you could see the explosiveness was definitely still 100% there in terms of how quickly he comes out of his cuts and how he's able to get from, first gear to second gear. I think that was still there. And then this, his top speed on there was still really good. It's just, at the end kind of ran out of gas. But I think, this is a guy who just got back to practice a few weeks ago, first real game in almost a year. So to be expected. But in spite of that, to still run for, I think he had the second most rushing yards in the league this week. And he didn't even have the most carries on his team. I mean, he looked fantastic, and I got to give Cook some credit. I think the duo as a pairing, it really looked like something that the Jets can lean on going forward throughout the season. So I was impressed with Breece and his return, and just the running game overall. I thought was something to be optimistic about.
Yeah, another guy that definitely deserves a lot of credit is Jordan Whitehead, who got a lot of criticism last year, but 3 interceptions, and he was flying around making plays all night. The defense as a whole dominated. Josh Allen cannot figure out Robert Saleh's defense. It was a great night, great start to the season. Was so glad to be there. And when do we talk about it? We're gonna drop the shtick.
It was. I mean, I'm still disappointed that
I was kind of hoping we were just gonna go.
You're still in the hotel. I hear some honking outside the window.
Yeah, we're still in the city.
I mean, no, but we do have to talk about those end zones and how they're not fully painted in. It's a little frustrating, but the green paint, you don't really notice it too much, but it's slightly off-putting, so I wish it was fully painted in. But other than that, I thought the uniforms looked great. I love Salah's energy, on Garrett's touchdown, running over immediately, and then he was the second guy to get to Gibson. Lazard was there first, and then Salah, so I love that. So the end zone paint, a little disappointing. But other than that, I mean, how could you start a season off any better? It was just, I'm so glad we were able to be at that game.
The most insulting part of the whole thing was at halftime. I'm going to drop it. At halftime, when they had the opener for Billy Joel or whatever, and he's playing Dream On to the entire soulless MetLife crowd, and they're showing images of Rodgers in a Jets jersey throwing to Garrett Wilson in the preseason. I'm like, can you guys just read the room? And obviously, we were going to try to do that shtick the entire pod, but I think it's impossible. We don't want to have a mopey therapy session pod. I'm sure there's enough of that.
I'm sure you've all heard that plenty of that by now.
It's just, yeah, this is gonna be. We're gonna have a lot of ambient noise for this podcast.
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
adds to the New York City feel. I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to say. Just, I mean, I guess as a Jets fan, you kind of are always expecting something to go wrong. Like, it did feel too good to be true, and that moment of him. Oh, sorry, the sirens are just very distracting. That's Rogers getting his ride to the hospital right now. That moment where he ran out of the tunnel and the whole crowd is going crazy and the lights are off and the green wristbands are flashing and he's got the American flag, and I almost started crying. I was just like, wow.
I was getting
We're,
chills. I was getting chills.
we're finally here. We've waited for this for so long. They haven't been to the playoffs since I was 10 years old, for God's sakes. And just what a special moment. We're here. Anniversary of 9/11, just the excitement, the atmosphere of that stadium. And just for it to end in like fourth play, didn't even complete a pass. I did not like it, and this is completely unreasonable. But I was not happy when they announced Vinny Testaverde as the honorary captain. I was like, well, could you chose somebody else from that team? Because that was the image that I just kept seeing all summer. I was like, I was watching Hard Knocks with my parents. And my mom was like, "Oh, you guys must be so excited for this year. This is just the most exciting time to ever be a Jets fan." I was like, "I'm trying to temper expectations. Like, I've just seen too many things go wrong. I wasn't even alive, but I literally brought it up. I was like, the Jets were Super Bowl favorites, and Vinny Testaverde pops his Achilles on the third play from scrimmage. Like, you just never know what can happen. It's so hard to win in this league, and it's just, and especially when you're a cursed franchise, and for things to go the way they did." The only positive, and I'm not sure how long this podcast is going to be. We prepared absolutely nothing, but the only positive I can say is that Robert Saleh, this team, and Zach Wilson deserve a lot of credit for pulling that game out. I think you saw the character of that team, and the depressing part is you see that, yeah, you add Aaron Rodgers to that team with this coaching, and they're Super Bowl contenders. There's no bones about it, and without Rodgers, that hope definitely takes a drastic turn, and now the goals shift for the season. And, I still think with this defense and you see this running game, playoffs are still in the picture. Some people might roll their eyes at that, but with this team, you really felt like the Jets were one of those 5-6 teams that had a realistic chance to win the Super Bowl, and that dream, unfortunately, is dead and just heartbreaking. I mean, I would argue there's not a more cursed franchise than this team. Michael, I kept looking over at you during the game, and at one time you just had your eyes closed and you just were like looking up to the skies. Another time you just had like 1,000-mile stare. I'll turn it over to you. I know we don't want to be mopey on this podcast, but can you just walk us through your night?
Yeah, I mean, that was me for most of this game. I was just staring blankly into space. I was not getting into it on the third downs or really cheering for much of anything.
Hey, you're sitting.
I was just staring. I was staring at that tunnel, just waiting, praying that Aaron Rodgers would pull a Willis Reed and just walk out of there at some point. Obviously, it never happened. But I mean, once the game got down to it in the fourth quarter, and I realized, and I think this was kind of the crowd as a whole too. I think we all kind of realized, like, wait a minute, we could still win this game. And then I think fourth quarter, the energy kind of came back, especially when, they started forcing a couple turnovers. They finally got the one touchdown drive going. Then I was fully back into it. And I was like, you know what? Let's forget about that for just a few minutes here. Let's win this football game. Talk about that later. And so the end of the game, the energy was back in the building, and it was crazy. It was as loud as, by far, the loudest of any game I've been to.
The punt return was right at us.
Yeah, it was right at us, and so we were feeling all that energy. And I think it's, again, I haven't been to every game in my life, but I think it's the loudest game.
Oh, definitely.
Jets game in my life history, for sure. Definitely. I mean, just listen to those crowd pops on the highlights. It's insane. It sounded like a college game.
Yeah, and that's
a college environment.
Yeah, and that's with Rodgers going down with 12 minutes?
Exactly. I mean, the opening defensive drive and that first run by Brees was just it was bonkers in there. So all the credit to the Jets fans who showed up. This is everything I've ever dreamed a Jets crowd could be, because I've been to games the past few years and I've just wondered, man, imagine if this place was full, if this team was good and everyone was into it, how loud it could be in here. and they never really tapped into that potential, but they finally did in this game, and I hope that throughout the season we can keep that going. Even without Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, I mean, I don't have much to say that I don't think hasn't been said before. It's just, I mean, what can you say? It sucks, but this is the reality, and you gotta work with the hand that you've been dealt and try to make the best of it. So this is where we're at. We're 1-0, and we'll take it from here and just hope for the best. Again, like I haven't posted anything yet. I haven't done an article or a tweet yet. I've been too busy flying at like 5 in the morning trying to get back here after the game. I think I slept like 3 hours, so haven't been able to process the thoughts too much or put anything articulate or too elaborate out there. So it just hurts, and it's hard to believe, but at the same time, it's pretty easy to believe because it just feels like this type of thing is always what happens to the Jets. But maybe it's the start of a different story, not the story we expected, but one that could be equally as magical. Maybe it transpires this year, maybe a year in the future, but I think there's still reason to believe that this team is headed in the right direction with the pieces that they have on both sides of the ball, with the front office, the coaching staff in place. There's all that is still there. So they're still trending towards, I believe they are, building that established culture of being a team that is competitive and plays entertaining football and puts themselves in that position to compete every year. And obviously, hopefully, they figure out quarterback at some point. But for now, I'm just going to focus on that 1-0 in the standings and just hope for the best week by week with this team and see what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to speculate. I think some people on Twitter were talking about the future with Rodgers. Well, we haven't heard anything from him. I don't know how much it's worth, but I do think he comes back from this. I do think he comes and plays in 2024. We'll see. He is going to be 40, trying to recover from it. I do think it's minor, but I do think it makes a difference that it's his left Achilles and not his right Achilles, because it's his plant foot and not the one he rotates on. And I was even listening to him. Part of the reason he's changed his throwing motion over the years is because he's had a lot of like left knee injuries, and it was to take pressure off that left knee. So we'll see. I think either way, it's devastating. It's heartbreaking. But like you said, everything that minus Rodgers that had you optimistic about the direction that this franchise was going, and with this coaching staff, the front office, and the team that they built is still in place. And so, the Jets are in the right hands. It's just, in order to win a Super Bowl, you just need everything to go your way. And it sucks that it happened this early, but it could have happened any week, could have happened in the playoffs. Unless you win it, the season's always going to end in heartbreak. And it does feel like, I'm trying to fight this feeling of like, oh, the Jets season's over. And I have to remember, it's like, hey, they went to back-to-back AFC championships with the formula that they're about to enact. Young quarterback, dominant defense, great run game. Saul and Hackett were in Jacksonville when they went to the AFC championship with Blake Bortles and that defense.
Exactly.
And so I think, if the goalposts shifted on what a successful season is, I would say so. I think, with Rodgers, this is a team that can win a Super Bowl, and without him, I think this is a team that can still compete for a playoff spot. And, I do think Zach will be better than he was last year. I think he deserves a lot of credit for going into that environment and pulling out the win, even though it wasn't like he was great or anything. And clearly the Jets are still scared to let him throw the ball, afraid for him to make that mistake. But I think it'll be helpful for him to have, hopefully, Rodgers in that QB room on the sideline, being a pseudo offensive coordinator, QB coach. I do think that'll have an impact on him. We'll see what type of move they make. I do think they'll bring in some sort of veteran, but it'll be Zach Wilson's team up until at least the bye. I think that's the time where you could switch to somebody you brought in, if you did sign a Carson Wentz or traded for a Jacoby Brissett or a Gardner Minshew or a Cooper Rush. I think they'll bring in somebody. They got our guy Boyle. How about that? How insane would that story be if Tim Boyle takes over after he was all-time podcast guest? But yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking. I woke up this morning. I mean, I think last night I was able to kind of compartmentalize. I was like, it's just an ankle sprain. Like I wasn't looking at Twitter, and I got fully back into that game. And then as we were walking out of the stadium, I was completely rationalizing. I was saying to Michael, I was like, okay, well, if the offseason was like our regular season, we definitely won that. And then this game was like our Super Bowl. And, it was a great year, because the last 6, 7, 8 months of being a Jets fan have been honestly the best time of being a Jets fan in my entire life, as sad as that is to say. It's it's been awesome. In the anticipation and excitement, it's devastating that it's done like this, but I do believe that Rodgers gives it another go in 2024. We'll see how he is coming off an Achilles. He's an older quarterback, so it's not like he's a running back trying to come back from that injury. But, I do believe they'll still have the pieces in place next year, whether it's Rodgers or if they have to go out and make a move next offseason again. Or, hey, if Zach Wilson is able to take some strides this season where you feel, confident giving him a fourth year, this is still a team that is on the cusp of relevancy. And I do think that the season is not over. This defense is going to have them in every single game this year. And it's just how many points can Zach Wilson, Breece Hall, and Garrett Wilson, put up. But this defense, I believe, is the best in the league. And it's just like, there were Jets fans that were leaving the game in front of me. I don't blame them. With like 13 minutes to go and we're down a touchdown. And I think it's just because with Zach Wilson at quarterback, this was our experience at times last year. It's like you can be down 6 points, but it feels like you're down 20 because they just don't have the confidence in him.
Yeah.
But I will say I like the strides that you saw from him preseason. I think last night was a big step, even though it wasn't like he threw down the field all that much. I think you buy into Zach and you just hope that this offensive line and the rest of the playmakers can stay healthy and that this running game can carry him. And who knows, maybe he can make some strides to at least competent level quarterback play that they can survive on. What did you make of Zach Wilson's performance? I guess we'll start there. I don't know how long we're going to do today. My voice is shot and we're still just reeling from whatever the hell we just watched. But let's go through some different units, get out of here. We'll do another podcast towards the end of the week talking about Dallas. But what did you make of Zach's game last night?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the realistic hope is that he can be that competent quarterback, like you said, because, as much as we want to see him tap into that ceiling that he had when he was drafted second overall, it's just too far out of reach from what he showed so far to truly believe in that. And, maybe there is still a non-zero chance he can touch that at some point. But for now, I think the realistic bar is competency. And that's what I think was promising about his preseason, was that it wasn't flashy in any way, but he did show the type of things that make you think, okay, this guy can hang in there, manage a game, and let the defense win a game for the team instead of some of the games we saw last year, most namely the two New England games where, despite the defense dominating, he's doing things that held the team back so much that they couldn't win because of the defense. But I think in this game, outside of a bad interception, it was definitely a pretty bad interception. As one of the worst he's probably thrown. I don't really know what he was seeing on that one, but outside of that, to his credit, he protected the ball outside of that. I think he made most of the easy throws that were there, and it was not anything close to great, maybe not even average, but it wasn't atrocious. And in this game, with the defense playing the way they were playing, that was enough to get the job done. And I think there were multiple games last year where it would have gotten the job done, to the point where you add 2 wins against the Patriots. Now you're a wild card team. So I think that expectation of being a potential playoff team is still there, as long as he can be that type of quarterback who doesn't have any multi-turnover games. I think that's the key. 1 turnover you can live with, like he showed in this game. But once you get into the multiple turnovers, that's when you're going to start running into trouble, when you're not a quarterback who's going to be explosive enough to make up for that. Like a Josh Allen can at times make up for that because he's so explosive in other ways. But a guy like Zach hasn't shown yet that he can make those mistakes and overcome it. So I think avoiding multi-turnover games will be big. And just hitting those easy throws and not missing layups, which in this game, I think for the most part, he did a nice job of that. And it wasn't always pretty. There was pressure. He was, still some other issues. He was holding the ball too long, still extending plays probably longer than he should have, maybe a little late on some throws. So plenty of stuff.
Ball placement wasn't perfect on that Garrett TD.
Well, it wasn't perfect, but I think it was, it was a really good play by Tre'Davious White. I mean, 99 times out of 100, that's a great pass deflection. But Garrett Wilson is 1 out of 100. So, I mean,
he put it inside. We can say it was a bad throw. I mean, he gave him a chance, I guess.
I don't think it was bad. No, I get what you're saying. Like, it definitely wasn't ideal. It should have been, closer to the pylon. It was a little too far inside. But I thought the elevation on it and the timing was pretty good. So it was like a 30 70 ball.
I will say
Let's say that
when we start,
instead of a 50-50.
I guess that's true.
So,
No, I think that was a 10-90 ball. Garrett Wilson's just absurd.
a 10. That's true. I did just say
What
it's
what other
probably
what
99
other
times the
receivers making
best.
that catch? Have you ever seen a catch like that in your life on a fade?
But I think sometimes you'll see quarterbacks miss that throw entirely. Like,
Yeah, but
didn't
we're
Joe
talking
Flacco throw a
50-50.
couple fades last year that weren't even inbounds? So, like, he gave him a chance.
Yeah, I'm saying
I mean,
okay.
it definitely wasn't
It
ideal.
wasn't a
It wasn't.
0-100 ball, but it was 10-90.
That's fair.
I think
Much
the
more
thing
of
that
a
was
great
really
catch than
concerning,
throw.
the thing that was really concerning, and I was just like, oh no, is when he starts running like 25 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Clearly has the athleticism to get away from guys, but there's still some of that has to make a play pressure that he feels. I do believe that. I think Hackett is going to be a better fit for him than LaFleur. He seems to be more comfortable. Things doesn't seem, at least from when you listen to him now, preseason and training camp as the second string QB, and doesn't have the expectations that he did last year. Completely different scenario, but the way he's talked about his head going into games this year versus last year, in the limited times we've seen him so far, he seems a lot clearer. He seems to like the direction that this coaching staff is going in, and I think he's focusing less on trying to be perfect or make the big play, because you see with this defense that they'll have him in every single game. I think his best play was actually the throw to Garrett before that touchdown, where he hit him on like a third down. I think the other impressive one was the hook shot to Lazard, where he was getting brought down. I mean, that's where you see some of that freakiness. But you'd like to see him be a little bit more consistent. I will say this is a great Bills defense, and it's one that, hey, Rodgers was holding onto the ball. That's the reason he got hurt. I saw that report about Rodgers doesn't like the cut blocks or whatever that the Jets were doing. It's like,
I think that's pretty
bullshit.
ridiculous.
First of all,
I think he got injured. Let's make up a story that tries to reveal why it happened. Like, please just stop.
There are two things that
I think that's ridiculous.
People will just want to point the finger and blame somebody. I think Rodgers is going to kick himself for not just throwing it to Wilson immediately. It was very uncharacteristic of him. But he also talked about, like, look, there's going to be butterflies at the beginning of this game. I don't blame him. As soon as he gets a completion and he gets going, that's when those things tend to fade. He didn't even get a single one. There's the discussion about turf versus grass. I would side with the players in this one. I do think that it's more likely for your cleat to get caught in turf than it is to get caught in grass. But J.K. Dobbins tore his Achilles yesterday on a grass field. Kevin Durant tore it on a basketball court. I mean, this thing could have happened anywhere. Plenty of other teams have turf as well. But I do think I do understand the players' frustration, especially after it was just dumping rain on that field an hour before kickoff. And every tackle, every cut, it just does look a little rough to play on turf. So I'll side with the players on that one. But again, I think it's just one of those freak things. If it's anybody's fault, it's Rodgers for not getting rid of that ball. But it's just, you want to look for somebody to point the finger at, but it's just, there's nobody. You can point the middle finger.
It's just a random occurrence. There's no finger pointing on that type of thing. And even I think, some people were talking about, like, oh, the Jets should have upgraded the offensive line more, and now that contributed to the injury. I think, like, yes, we've said this plenty that they could have done more for the offensive line, but I don't think that has much to do with injuries to quarterbacks, because even if you have a great offensive line, you're going to get hit dozens and dozens and dozens of times throughout the year. Every quarterback's going to get hit, even if you're protected well. If anything, if you have a better offensive line, you might hold the ball longer and have more longer developing dropbacks and get hit on some of those types of plays. So everyone's getting hit. And obviously it's, ideally less frequently if you have a good offensive line, but I don't think that causes injuries. Like, maybe the risk is a little bit higher, but at the end of the day, it's a freak thing that's just going to happen randomly when it decides to happen. And there's really no finger pointing with injuries, I think.
What did you think of the personnel usage? I mean, I don't know how much of this offense. I think it would have looked a lot different with Rodgers, clearly, but they went heavy with the 13 personnel. Bodden was out there. Ruckert was out there. Didn't see like any Mecole Hardman. And honestly,
zero offensive snaps.
Didn't see any Hardman. We saw some Cobb, but I will say after Xavier Gibson's running it back and there's no Rodgers out there, it's like I might give Xavier Gibson a lot more run with this offense just because he's so dynamic with the ball in his hands. What'd you make of the Jets' personnel usage?
Yeah, it was interesting. I'd be curious to know how that compares to what they plan to do with Rodgers, but I mean, with Zach Wilson in there, I guess, they didn't game plan for him. He didn't practice with the first team. I guess they wanted to just, go heavy, run the football, and create opportunities for play action, which I think they could have done a little more play action. Maybe they'll work some more of that into the game plan with a full week of preparation. But we did see this coming. We did think that there was a high likelihood they were going to do a lot of 12 personnel. Specifically that the 3 tight ends, maybe not so much, but that was a little bit more than I expected. But based on Hackett's history, what the Packers were doing, like that was always a fixture. So it seemed like they were likely to do that. But despite having the tight ends out there a lot, they didn't really throw to them, which was interesting.
Well,
I think they run.
They did. Rodgers threw to Conklin, and then it was Zach out there, and Zach didn't really throw to the tight ends all that much last year. But I agree. I think. Sorry, keep going.
Cobb was out there a lot, and he didn't really get the ball, which was interesting as well. So I'm curious to see how the target distribution plays out now that Zach is in there.
I think, yeah. I mean, this offense is going to go as far as this running game takes it. If the offensive line stays healthy, and by the way, I mean, I haven't rewatched any of the all 22 for this game. I've rewatched the highlights, and but I'll probably rewatch it tonight or tomorrow whenever I can stomach the courage. But Becton makes a big difference. I saw him on a number of plays. And this offensive line as a whole looked pretty good in the run game, which is something that we were questioning. We didn't know what it was going to look like because they had some struggles in preseason. They haven't had as much time together. I know Dwayne Brown got off to a bit of a rough start to this game. I think maybe some rust there. He didn't play all at training camp. He's only practiced the last 3 weeks. But I think the O-line did pull itself together. And this team is going to go as far as the O-line of the running game takes it. And I think that'll create more opportunities for Zach, if everybody can stay healthy, to play that ground and pound football. And then, like you said, open up that play action game, take the stuff that's underneath. And when defenses load the box, you're going to get that single coverage on Garrett Wilson. And we know that he can beat that. And so the Jets don't need Zach Wilson to be anything special. They just need, what would you say? Like, if you, in terms of top 32 quarterbacks, like where does he have to rank for the Jets to be competitive? Like 20?
20th to 22nd.
Yeah. If he's in that range, the Jets, as depressing as that sounds, the Jets will win a lot of low-scoring, ugly games with this defense. I mean, this defense creates a lot of big plays, sacks and turnovers. They, play a little bit bend but don't break. They give up some yards, but they're tough in the red zone. They're tough on the plus side of the 50. So teams will get some field goals. Maybe they'll get a touchdown here or there, but make no mistake about it. I think a lot of people are criticizing Josh Allen and wondering about regression or whatnot. It's just like, no, this Jets defense is just for real. And I think a lot of quarterbacks are going to struggle with him. I know Dallas next week, they just dropped 40 on the Giants. And, I think the Jets are definite underdogs in that game. I don't think I'll be picking the Jets in that game, but it will not surprise me if Dallas struggles against this Jets defense. I think every single week this defense is going to keep them in it. And so it's just about getting 20th ranked quarterback play out of Zach Wilson. And we'll see what they do, because I do think they'll make a move. I wonder how aggressive they'll be in terms of, the trade market. I think the two guys that stand out to me on the trade market are probably Jacoby Brissett and Gardner Minshew. Free agent-wise, Carson Wentz, he has the connection to Joe Douglas. Matt Ryan's out there. People float out Tom Brady. I would call him, but 46-year-old Tom Brady's not coming to play for the Jets, especially a day after getting inducted into the Patriots Ring of Honor. Right. We'll talk about the rest of the team and get out of here, but I guess just since we're on it briefly, have you looked into any veteran quarterbacks? Is there anybody out there that Teddy Bridgewater? Is there anybody that's like, all right, they can play this, manage the game, trust the defense, run game, and at least have them behind Zach, and then at the bye, if you want to make the change, you can do it?
Well, I mean, personally, I would make a type of move to where I'm pursuing someone to have them start, because as much as I'm trying to be optimistic about Zach, I definitely don't believe he's going to be the guy who can lead them to the playoffs this year. So that's what I would do. But I feel like they're just going to make a low tier signing to be the backup above Boyle, like a Colt McCoy or something like that. I feel like it's going to be something boring.
I think it's going to be like
that. But who do you think?
I think it'll be Carson Wentz, honestly.
You think so?
I think so. I mean, we'll see about. There's been some questions about him as a leader, so Douglas will know a lot more about that. But I just looking at his stats, I'm not going to pretend I've watched too much Carson Wentz film. I mean, clearly not ideal. This is not, I think the thing with Wentz is I think he just gives you a little bit higher of a ceiling than a guy like Colt McCoy. He's a free agent. He had a bad year with Washington the year before, last year. But then going back to Indy, he still threw like 27 touchdowns, I believe. And then, it's
I would
demoralizing.
like Wentz. There's a ceiling there, but
But,
yeah, I mean that's the type of thing I would be into because he has a ceiling. Like I think if you get one of these, boring veteran backups, like whoever you want to pick, I think, maybe they raise the floor versus Zach Wilson. But I mean, this is just such a good team to where I would almost prefer to just stick with Zach and see if he could tap into the ceiling because, like you're only going to go so far with, like we said, the mid-level quarterback play. So I think this team is outside the quarterback definitely championship caliber. So if we're going to change the quarterback, I'd rather get like a Carson Wentz who has shown you that he can be the backbone of a Super Bowl team, even if it was a long time ago.
Yeah,
the possibility does exist. There is some potential for him to be more than just I'll check the ball down for you. And like we know the downsides, but like this is the situation we're in. So we're trying to pick the best option.
And we'll be honest, I haven't thought about this all that much, so we'll run through a different number of guys here. But or I have thought about it, I guess not too deeply and broken it all down. I guess the thing with Wentz is the turnover issue, and I think part of the reason you would make the switch from Wilson is because you want to get a guy who's just going to protect the football. So I do think, there's the lower ceiling but higher floor vets. I wonder what Matt Ryan's up to, although he did not look all that good last year. But I do think that's potentially an option. If they go the trade route, I think Jacoby Brissett or Minshew are the most intriguing options. I mentioned Bridgewater. Another one was Cooper Rush. I know he's younger, but he did go 4-1 with Dallas last year and leaned on a good defense and good run game. I do think they're going to bring in somebody. I don't know exactly who it's going to be, but I do expect them to bring in somebody just so they have something to turn to at the bye week if it's not going well and Zach is really crapping the bed. We'll see how confident they are in Tim Boyle. I thought he looked actually pretty good in the preseason. I know he got off to a rough start and the fans seemed to turn on him. And again, we're talking about Tim Boyle here, but he looked pretty damn good in that Giants game. Has been in this offense for a number of years, and I do trust him a little bit more than some of the options that are out there. I guess Jameis Winston is another guy.
Winston is intriguing to me. I kind of like that.
Do you?
There's just upside. I know he's very turnover prone, so he wouldn't give us anything different than what we're used to in that area. But I mean, if you want someone who's going to feed Garrett Wilson and give him shots down the field, I think you have your guy.
Man, 3 days or yesterday at this time, 24 hours ago, we were talking about Aaron Rodgers, the Jets being Super Bowl contenders. 24 hours later, we're talking about Jameis Winston, Carson Wentz. Any of those trade guys sound intriguing to you? I know you were kind of high on Minshew, Jacoby Brissett, Cooper Rush. Any of those guys? I mean,
Brissett is kind of like the high floor type of guy,
right?
Protect the ball. I mean, if you want to maximize your odds of getting to the playoffs, I think Brissett is a really good guy to look at because he's a very solid floor. He's shown his whole career, very low interception rate, but also very consistently just does not push the ball down the field. So I think you know exactly what he would give you. I think it just depends on how does that compare to what Zach is giving you. Because if Zach can show a similar floor, then you'd rather just roll with him and have the continuity in the ceiling. But if Zach is still very erratic and having those multi-turnover games, then maybe they just want the guy all right, let's stabilize the quarterback position. Let's try and make the playoffs and just get some good momentum going with this team. Then a guy like Brissett could make sense. So I do like Brissett, but man, you're right. Just 24 hours ago, Aaron Rodgers was toting the American flag into MetLife Stadium, going crazy. And now here we are talking about Gardner Minshew.
Man, it's just not fair being a Jets fan. Ugh.
A lot of things in life aren't fair.
That's true. So that's true.
We want to know we're first place in the division. Let's roll.
Constant setbacks. You're right. We are 1-0 in the division. I do think this defense is going to have him in every game. And who knows? I do believe that Zach will be better than he was last year. And they were able to win games with this formula. And I think this team is only better. We'll see if QB coach / OC Aaron Rodgers can milk the best out of Zach Wilson. But until we see it, it's hard to believe it. I mean, I do think Zach deserves credit for what he did last night. Let's talk about a few other things from last night, and then we'll get out of here. And then, on Friday's podcast, we'll break down Dallas and probably have a little bit more on some of the free agent quarterbacks, or maybe they'll have already made a move by then. I guess we could start with the defense. We kind of touched on Breece Hall, but we were kind of in joke mode then. Is there anything else we want to add on how impressive he was last night?
No, I think I mostly touched on it. I know we were in joke mode, but I was kind of saying my real thoughts. I mean, I feel like we saw, the explosiveness and the cutting ability, also some great vision, especially that first run, the patience to let that develop. He looked really good in a lot of aspects. Definitely just think the one run showed that, there's a reason he's on a pitch count right now, and he'll take a little time to ramp up. But it's exciting to think about if this is where he's at right now. Just imagine where he could be with some more games under his belt.
All right, let's talk. Oh, any thoughts on Dalvin Cook, his debut? I know you mentioned it briefly, but again, I thought, some of the things that you talked about did pop up, but also I thought he was a nice change of pace for Breece.
Yeah, I mean, there were some good flashes. Overall, his rushing wasn't as close to as efficient as Breece. I think he had like 2.5 yards per carry or something, but some of those plays weren't well blocked. Yeah, you saw some glimpses of the speed. They got him involved in the passing game a little bit. Just between both guys, I think you're able to see, like, regardless of who's getting the ball, it feels like you always have a home run threat out there. That's the feeling that I got watching that. So I think that's what's really exciting, and that's what this offense is even more so going to need now, because like right now, until Zach shows it, you don't believe that the passing game is a big home run threat. So to have that in the ground game can, like such as the run that Breece gave you, like he put points on the board with that single play, despite the Jets doing nothing else on the whole drive. You need to have plays like that out of your run game to carry an offense like this that has a lot of questions in the passing game.
All right, let's talk about the defense. I did mention Jordan Whitehead. He was unbelievable last night. The other guy who really flashed me watching it was Quincy Williams, because he was already maybe the fastest guy on the field, at the very least the fastest linebacker the Jets have. But you can see that the comfort level in this system and him maturing as a player and as a leader, as a veteran, has paid dividends. I mean, Saleh and Ulbrich know how to develop linebackers, and he's playing without thinking, and he's turning into the Jets' version of a Matt Milano. He's not there yet, but in terms of a uber athletic pass coverage linebacker flying across the field, taking away things underneath. I thought Quincy Williams really stood out to me, and he was flying around there. I mean, obviously the defensive line, I was hoping that they weren't gonna they couldn't get the pressure at the end of the game when the Bills were driving, and the Bills were able to tie it up. But as a whole, this defensive line was unbelievable. I mean, Jermaine Johnson looks like a star. Quinn Williams, we already know, is a superstar, and across the board, I mean, this rotation is really the pillar of this team. I mean, the fact that they're 10 deep, they can constantly rotate guys is a little surprising. They didn't even have Carl Lawson out there. So, yeah, what did you make of the defensive line? And I guess the defense as a whole we can kind of break down and then get out of here.
Yeah, well, first, Quincy, I mean, I just remember this play, a sneaky big play in this game. You remember that pass deflection he had on the shot into the end zone to James Cook near the end of the second quarter? That's a huge play in hindsight. I mean, I think most of us were just kind of checked out at that point.
Yeah, I don't remember
pointing
at all.
our faces at the field, but not really processing what we were looking at. But I had to just check the play-by-play to see where it was. I remembered it, but I didn't remember where it was. But it was a 2nd and 13, 34 seconds in the second quarter. That was a very close to a touchdown, but he got his hand up at the last second and deflected it. And the Bills kicked a field goal there a couple seconds instead of the touchdown. So that turned out to be massive in the end. So there was that play. He had the huge hit on, I think it was also Cook, in the flat to save that first down, to force the third down stop at that one point in the second half. So, I mean, yeah, he was really good. And he's, the biggest thing is the consistency. I don't really remember any missed tackles from him. And he made all those plays and was doing it efficiently without like, okay, here's a big highlight, but then here's a whiff that makes up for it. It was all positive from him, I felt like. So really good game from Quincy. And if he can maintain that development throughout the season, I mean, that's huge for the defense to just take them up to a whole nother level compared to where they were last year, especially in the run game. I think the run defense was good last year, but it can be even more dominant. I think Quincy can be a big part of leading that, and in coverage too, with the play I mentioned to Cook. Defending running backs and tight ends last year was the bigger issue than wide receivers because the corners were so good. But if Quincy's going to make plays like that, then you can feel even better about that part of your defense as well. So yeah, good call out on Quincy. He had a great game. It kind of flew under the radar because of Whitehead and the pass rush, but he was excellent. Looking at the pass rush, I mean, they didn't, maybe didn't finish as many sacks as you would like, and they couldn't get the stop at the end in the fourth quarter, but the overall pressure was
can't fault
fantastic. They're really consistent with the pressure. JFM, I think, had 8 pressures in this game, which it was kind of quiet because he had the 1 sack, I believe, but didn't really have any huge noticeable pressures, but he's just constantly in there causing havoc. And in this particular game, flushing Josh Allen out of the pocket was a good thing because he was not making good plays on the move. I mean, usually you want to contain him and not allow him to use his legs, get outside the pocket, but in this game where he's just chucking up prayers the whole game, the pressure was a very positive thing to force him outside of the pocket because he was just not making good decisions. So the pressure was huge in making Josh Allen uncomfortable and forcing him into some really bad decisions. But Quinnen, I think, had 5 pressures. JJ had 3, I believe. So everyone's getting involved. Huff 4. So a lot of guys getting involved in that pass rush. I thought Quentin was making some noise on the inside too, Quentin Jefferson. So so many weapons in this pass rush, and we didn't even see much from Will McDonald yet. He played some snaps, but didn't make too much noise from what I remember. But even without him making noise yet, without Carl Lawson, still bringing that pressure against a really good Bills offense.
Any thoughts on your boy Tony Adams? I think he got off to a bit of a tough start, but I mean, it's tough without rewatching, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I do remember a couple misses in the beginning of the game, but what I'll give him credit for is at the end of the day, the Bills didn't hit any deep shots down the middle.
That was the thing we talked about.
Right, exactly. One of the big keys, this is a young safety going up against an elite vertical passing team. And, Whitehead obviously made the picks, and, his game speaks for itself. He was Ed Reed in this game for some reason. But, Tony Adams, give him credit too, because it goes both ways. Even if you're not making the interceptions, just to have the communication and the discipline to play your assignment and take away those deep throws is a credit to the whole defense. And Tony Adams being the free safety back there is playing a huge role in that. So even when outside the interceptions, just the fact that the Bills rarely even targeted those deep shots down the field, and they wanted to coming into this game because you look at the Jets secondary. I don't want to target Sauce or Reed. I want to go after the young free safety with 2 starts. That's definitely who they want to go after, but he was disciplined enough to take those shots away, and the pressure also contributes to taking that away. But I think Adams deserves credit for holding his own and not being exposed in this game.
All right, Michael. I think that's it for now. Still processing what the hell just happened. I'm still just waiting to wake up, honestly. You can follow us at 2AJ Pod on Twitter. Michael _Nania. Myself, Ben W. Blessington. Go to jetsxfactor.com. Best place to go for Jets content. Please rate, review, subscribe on iTunes, and check out the Jets X Factor YouTube. I think that's going to do it for us, Michael. Last thoughts?
I've been trying to find something profound to say about all this because I feel like I want to have more to say than what everyone else is saying, because everyone feels the same thing, and we're all just trying to talk our way through it and process it and all that. So I wish I had something better to say, but I really don't. It just hurts, but you gotta move on, as with anything. So I'm trying to stay optimistic. I love so many aspects of this team and this roster. I think they still have so much potential. So looking at that 1-0 on the standings and trying to build off of that. So Cowboys are a great test coming off of this. I mean, with the way they beat down the Giants last week, you could hardly ask for a better measuring stick to see where this Jets team is at without Aaron Rodgers. So it's gonna be an interesting game for sure. But yeah, I don't know, everyone. I would just say keep your head up. Maybe I'm not the one to be saying this because you looked at me moping the whole game yesterday. But that's usually how I am. Like I'll be all depressed during a game, but then after that, I collect my thoughts. I'm like, all right, let's keep our heads up.
I'm kind of the opposite.
So,
I was keeping it light during the game. I think at one
yeah,
point I just started laughing. I was like, oh. And then this morning I woken up and I'm just like, oh my God, can't believe it. But like you
I
said,
gotta say though that moment where Gibson scored that touchdown, though, that regardless of what happens the rest of the season, what happened earlier in that game, that's
yeah, we
always
didn't
going to
really
be one
talk
of
about
my
it.
favorite moments as a
Yeah, I
sports
think
fan.
maybe we
That
should
is
have maybe
insane.
we should have touched on that more. I think this team just deserves so much credit for the way that they rallied. It was clearly an emotional victory because you all know that they win in at halftime and they're all like, it's the Achilles, it's not good. So if imagine, I just think about the veterans that have come in, the Dwayne Browns, the Al Woods, the Quentin Jeffersons. I mean, Brown was emotional after the
Cobb.
game. Cobb, Lazar, all these guys that have come in, all these guys that have been here. There was just so much excitement. And they're just sitting there on the bench, just feeling like absolutely gutted. As bad as we feel, I do feel for the players and the fact that this team didn't just get blown out because that was what I was expecting to happen. I was like, all right, Rodgers is out, and how the Jets going to get the shit kicked out of him, and it's just the most nightmare trip. I mean, this trip in general out to New York. When I was coming out to New York, there was a thunderstorm like 20 minutes away from Newark, so we got diverted to Harrisburg, PA. We were there for like 6 hours. The next day, we're going to go to the Yankees game. We're there, and it's raining for like 4 hours. That gets delayed, so we only catch the last few innings of that game. And then I'm trying to think. There was a few other things. Oh, then I guess for the game, I mean, when we were waiting, and there's like lightning, and it's just dumping on the MetLife turf. I was like, man, this might be the trip from hell. And of course, it probably still is. But the fact that this Jets team rallied and like you said, I mean, it got loud in there at the end of that game. Fans definitely got back into it. I was still just trying to be like, okay, it's just an ankle sprain. He'll be out 4 weeks. Just win this game right now. But I agree. I mean, the fact that the undrafted rookie, Xavier Gibson, house call, we were talking about it before the game too. It's like, oh, I wonder if Xavier Gibson can run one back. I mean, and I think I said it right before, or the person I was with actually said it right before he punted, was just like, all right, Xavier Gibson, run this back. And then just seeing him break down the sideline right towards us. I mean, I agree. That was a special moment and an emotional win. And, the intro with Rodgers was electric. The atmosphere is great. But I think this team will always be, especially if Rodgers never plays again, this team will always be a huge what if, just because I think they're so damn good. And so now the goal shifts to make the playoffs, make strides as a team, hopefully get Rodgers back next year, and then 2024, that's your year to really push for the Super Bowl.
And I think Saleh deserves, and the whole coaching staff deserves so much credit for this game because, like, this was the antithesis of all those Jets games we've seen over the years where people criticize the coaches for saying this team is no heart, they have no fight, they're sleepwalking out there. All those criticisms, this was the complete opposite of that. This was a situation where the team had every right to be those things, but they were the complete opposite. So I think this is a game where you have to tip your cap to Coach Saleh and the whole staff so much for having these guys keep their heads up and go out there and not only not get down after Rodgers' injury, but just fight even harder and make a comeback in the second half when they had every reason to believe that they wouldn't be able to do that, but they did. So I think this is a huge stock raiser for Saleh and the coaching staff, and it's a positive thing to for fans to feel going forward that regardless of what happens, hopefully we have our coach, we have our culture, and all those things like that. So let's hope to see some more wins like this throughout the season. Like winning when you shouldn't is a big thing, to be consistently competitive on a yearly basis. Like I think the Titans are a really good example of that because like they've dealt with so many injuries over the years. They don't have the greatest quarterback, but every year they're in that playoff conversation because I think Vrabel's an amazing coach, and the Titans are a team that always plays hard and they compete and stuff like that. And that's how you establish a floor and consistency. And then hopefully you find the talent and you can get over the top and win, which, Tennessee hasn't been able to do. But I just think they're a really good example of, that culture you want to establish. And there are other, teams that do have the talent and they've been able to win consistently. But Jets are still trying to get to that point. And I think wins like this help you get there. So huge credit to Saleh.
All right. That's going to do it for us. We'll be back on Friday. Record the Dallas Cowboys preview pod on Thursday. We'll see if there's any news on new quarterback additions, but I think regardless, it's going to be the Zach Wilson show for at least the next few weeks. So buckle in. We're back in 2022. So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
But don't count the Jets out. This defense will keep them in literally every single game. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great week. Just try to – I don't know what advice I can give you. I guess the only advice I would say is if you have any friends who are giving you guff, texting you about making fun of the Jets and Aaron Rodgers, go ahead and block them. They're not real friends. All right. We're done. See ya.